like you, we have got one or two verses that have really been significant in our lives. And one of them is Acts 9 verse 6, which is, get up and go into the city and you'll be told what to do. Well, we actually, that was a verse the Lord gave Hugh and I as a family in 1987 when we joined the Vineyard Movement. But just in November, darling, was it last year? Yes. A young guy in Oxford came up to us with the same verse. And he didn't realise what an important verse it had been to us. And we felt the Holy Spirit fall on us and say, this time, I don't want you to get up and go to the city, London. I want you to go to my city, Jerusalem, and I will tell you what to do. So that was one of the main confirming verses for us, that we might go to Israel. Don, do you want to say about when we arrived?
So in February this year, 2015, we flew to Israel with EasyJet. And in early February, we arrived in a sandstorm. We were not expecting it at all, but as we flew into Israeli airspace, everything looked yellow. Yeah. And as we got out at the airport and walked through, there was sand blowing everywhere and a strong wind. And as we went to collect our taxi, sand blowing everywhere.
And so we arrived not speaking the language, not being able to read the language. This slightly older couple standing in the middle of a sandstorm at arrivals with soldiers around us with guns parading. And we thought, this is really a mission trip. Anyway, in the end, our taxi arrived and we got to Jerusalem, which was wonderful.
We went into Jerusalem and we stayed in a Christian guest house in the old city, just inside the Jaffa Gate. And just settled down that night. And the next morning, a friend of ours, Garth Gilmore, came and met us and spent the entire day walking us around the old city. Absolutely amazing, really. Much of Jerusalem nowadays is actually a Crusader city from really just about 1000 AD or a little bit later than that. But it cannot have been very much different from the way the city was in Jesus' time, with narrow pedestrian streets and the buildings right close up. And it was extraordinary to go to some of the places where Jesus must have walked.
It was an amazing time. We hadn't realised that often people feel called to go to Israel. We just didn't know that. But certainly for us, it was a very foundational time. And speaking for me, just as a sort of personal thing, when I had a second bout of cancer, and then had some difficulties walking after that, I thought, how am I ever going to be able to go to Israel and wander about? And you know, when Garth came to us that day and said, I'm going to look after you today and I'm hiring a car and I'm going to be your personal guide for the whole week while you're in Israel, I nearly wept because I felt it was the kindness of God to provide for us. And it was the most wonderful, we felt very spoiled, and it was a wonderful thing. Anyway, the next day, after the sandstorm, there was a whirlwind. And do you want to say anything about that?
I don't think we noticed it so much in the day walking round because we were in covered streets and this sort of thing, but certainly come the evening when we came to go out to have supper together, the wind was extremely strong. So we arrived in a sandstorm one day and the next day there was a whirlwind. And we asked ourselves what it is that this meant. What was the Lord trying to say to us in this? We didn't assume it was a coincidence at all. And we felt him talking about our foundations. Are they built on sand or are they built on solid rock?
2015 is in the Hebrew calendar 5775, which is the year of the whirlwind. And as Hugh said, we really asked the Lord, what does this mean? And we felt that for us personally, we needed to look at our own marriage, our own family, our own spiritual house. All houses look the same on the outside, but the foundation is our foundation because we have a relationship and spend our time with Jesus, or are we following other people? And we felt him saying, this is a time to make sure that our foundations are right. And that was something we wanted to share with you particularly, because it was quite a profound example of being in a whirlwind and seeing that nothing was going to be able to stand. And is our house built on the rock? So this is what we felt the Lord was saying, that it takes courage to follow him and not to follow others. And this whirlwind, in a sense, was representing to us a warning that everything that can be shaken will be shaken, and we need to look at our personal lives. Maybe you need to look at your lives. We think we're standing firm, but are we? On the outside we may look good, but on the inside, what is happening in our own lives? Are there areas that need to be addressed? And if so, we need to be addressing them now, and we certainly are. We encourage you too, because I think the time of shaking is coming, and that's going to be wonderful for those of us who are really building our lives on Jesus and not just following other people and looking good on the outside. So we want to be very careful we don't fall into that trap.
On one of our days in Jerusalem, we visited the Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, and I think one of the things that really struck you there, darling, would like to share with that.
Yes, the day before we visited the Holocaust Museum, I'd felt the Lord say to me and challenge me and say, it's time to speak up. My bride has a voice and I want to hear it. And I was quite shaken by this and just was mulling it over. And then when we went to the Holocaust Museum, I read this quote by Martin Niemöller that said, "They came from the communists, but I did not object because I wasn't a communist. They came for the socialists, I didn't object because I wasn't a socialist. They came for the Jews, and I didn't object because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to object." And that quote really impacted me because I felt Jesus was saying, I want my bride to speak up. She has a voice. I want an effervescent bride. I want a bride that is life-giving. I don't want a bride that is silent, because it's all about our relationship with him. And part of that relationship is speaking up for those around us that don't have a voice. And we just feel him challenging us to be using our voice to speak up for the broken, for the underprivileged, for those who need Jesus' intervention. And I think he's saying that to you too. And in the times ahead, we're going to need to speak up, because if we don't, we will be agreeing with the enemy and not with what the Lord is wanting for his people.
As well as time in Jerusalem, with Garth, we drove up the Jordan Valley through the West Bank and out into Israeli territory again, and spent a couple of days in Galilee at a Christian guest house there. And one of the joys there was meeting an Arab Christian couple who brought their youth group to spend the weekend at this same Christian guest house. And it was a privilege and a joy to meet with them and hear their story.
One of the amazing things about this family is that I think I'm right in saying that their daughter has married a German pastor and their son has married a Jewish girl. So within the family, they have Arabs, Jews, and a German family. And we were thinking that's quite an example of one new man, how the Lord longs for us to be a family together, like it says in Ephesians, at the end of Ephesians 2, that when we know Jesus, we come into his family, are adopted into his family. And that was a really wonderful expression of seeing that in action, and one I think that we were deeply touched by.
We also visited Capernaum, and right on the shores of the Sea of Galilee there, which was very atmospheric, and I think possibly the closest we felt to where Jesus had been. We visited a Messianic congregation there, and again back in Jerusalem. And on the Sunday, we drove down on the coast road, stopping off at Caesarea, where Herod had a palace right on the seashore, and we saw that and some of the Roman settlement there, and then back to Jerusalem.
It was fascinating being there, and one of the things I felt was that, yes, this was the place that Jesus walked and his disciples, apostles, walked, but equally we are called to walk in the same way, filled with the Holy Spirit, wherever we live. And in a way, it was very simple being there, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it was just made me realise how this is attainable for all of us when we're filled with the Holy Spirit. And we don't have to just be there, but where we are making a difference is part of his great commission to us.